Welcome back. Today I want to share with you some travel tips for planning your next visit to Italy. It'll be a selection of castles in central Italy in the area where I live, and I've lived for 53 years. So these castles are mostly privately owned, but I'll show you behind the scenes. We'll meet some of the owners and see the lifestyle of the people who live here. Here's where we are. We're in central Italy, Lazio, northern Lazio, between the lakes of Bracciano and Bolsena. And each one of the towns here, and there are over 60 of them, has a castle to visit. So if you are planning a cruise, take a couple of days before to visit this area, or if you want just a weekend away from Rome. There's lots to see. So we're starting with the castle on the lake of Bracciano, which is the one closest to Rome. It's an Odescalchi castle, the family's name, but some people just call it the Castle of Bracciano. You might recognize it because it's in many films that you might see on TV or at the cinema because of its beauty and the location. The original furnishings are there. There's a museum of arms and armor, and also many famous weddings have been held here. So this is one of the first best known castles because it's closer to Rome, and it's been operating as with guided tours for many years. Okay, another very beautiful castle owned by the original family who built it is in the small town of Vignanello. It belongs to the Ruspoli Marescotti family, and they still inhabit it. And notice this is one of the members of the family, Francesco Ruspoli, describing his family tree that's painted on a wall. The garden that surrounds the castle was created by one of the Ruspoli princesses whose father invented the famous Sacro Bosco in nearby Bomarzo. So all of these castles and families are intertwined over the history. So this is what they do inside the castle in order to keep up the maintenance, because a place like this costs a lot of money to maintain. They have lunches, they have concerts. This is another member of the family, Donna Giada Ruspoli, who does a quite well-known musical prize, and they have the concerts there in the castle. And the original brick floors are very unusual to be kept so well, so I put a picture of that in too. So that's the Vignanello Ruspoli Castle. Another privately owned castle of the family of Cecchini Bisoni, here they are with us in their castle, is in the small town of Proceno. And right over the hills, you're in Tuscany already. And they were famous for archaeology, for printing, and for music. So inside the castle, there are several rooms dedicated as a museum to the family's background. They also have apartments to rent out to visitors. After Proceno, you can go to visit another privately owned castle of the painter Balthus, the famous painter Balthus. In the 1930s, he bought this huge castle in the tiny town of Monte Calvello, and it still has its beautiful frescoes inside. Here's the owner, the son of Balthus and his wife, and you can visit that, and very rarely it's open, so you have to plan ahead for that one. Another similar castle is owned by these two sisters, the Barberini sisters. Originally, it was an Orsini stronghold, and they also have this beautiful loggia that you see, and it's very similar to the one in Monte Calvello. You see, they have a beautiful view. They needed an outdoor space, frescoed. Some of the frescoes are still existent. And so you see, the same artists and architects worked on all of these castles in the area. That's why there's so many similarities. If you want to have a special wedding or an event, I would suggest the Torre Alfina Castle. It's not owned by a family anymore, but it's managed by a catering company. It's a very large, very beautiful castle in a very small town called Torre Alfina, right on the border with Tuscany. Quite impressive. Back to another smaller castle owned by a private family, the Misciatelli family, and it dates back to about 1250 when they had this medieval enclosed garden that still can be admired. Some of the people who lived in these castles over the century were quite famous, quite well known. You might have heard of Giulia Farnese and Lucrezia Borgia. They both lived here as young girls. And again, the original furnishings, you can tell because the velvet is kind of worn out and used for weddings. Now, you all have heard of Civita, the city, the dying city. There it is on its little hilltop. And very close to Civita is the large castle of the Monaldeschi family that is also a venue for weddings. And the best view of Civita is from their windows, from their castle. This is surrounded by the Calanchi, a very wild landscape. So Lubriano, a small town near the Calanchi. Now, not all castles are owned still by the same families. Many, of course, had to be given up, and they were taken over by the city or by the state and have been turned into museums. Here are two excellent examples of museums inside castles. The one on the right is Civita Castellana. It's a fortress built by San Gallo, and today it is a museum of archaeology. And another archaeology museum can be found in the small castle with this beautiful bridge over the river, and that's called Vulci. So we've got Vulci Castle, Archaeological Museum, and Civita Castellana's museum in the San Gallo fortress. If it isn't made into a museum, it might be made into a town hall, but we'll see a few of those next. But other museums, this one in Bolsena, in this Monaldeschi castle. And if you do get to Bolsena, that's the other lake further north from Rome. There are not just the castle museum, but there are other two palaces, the Cozza Caposavi building and the one of Principe del Drago, which also can be visited, and they have guests and they have weddings also in these places. And these are two instead that are town halls nowadays. This one is Bomarzo. It was an Orsini palace or castle. And again, we have the connection with the Sacro Bosco of the Orsini family in Bomarzo. In a small town right on the edge with Tuscany is a little town called Onano. And the frescoes that you'll find in there, it's a city hall nowadays, are not Renaissance frescoes, but they're showing off the family of Irish merchants who used to live there. So for 150 years, this town was run by an Irish family, the Denhams. These are just some of the stories that I tell in my little book. I can't tell them all now, but get a copy of the book and you'll find out some of these fascinating international connections. This is a sad one. This is Bassano Romano, a beautiful Giustiniano palace or castle. And inside, it's quite disappointing. It's all empty nowadays. At a certain moment, Fellini used it as the set for his Dolce Vita film, and so I call it the Dolce Vita Castle. This is what it looks like inside. Not even a single fireplace is left. Everything was taken out. But they couldn't take out the frescoes, and they couldn't take out the ceramic tile floors. So that's what you'll see inside, the things that were painted in the 1500s and set down in the 1500s. So it's empty except for those things. Thank goodness some young people are taking over and buying and restoring old castles that have been run down, like Stefano here, who's bought this beautiful Farnese castle at Ischia di Castro, and with his own money has restored it, and now it is used as a place for concerts and conferences. And right across the city, the piazza from this castle, you can go back in time and eat in one of these typical little trattorie, the local wonderful, wonderful food that this area has. Okay, so those are just a few stories that many more will be found in my small book called Etruria Travel History and Itineraries in Central Italy. There's even a map of all the cities, the towns, and the castles. And you can order a copy by going to my website, Elegant Etruria, or you can just ask for your signed copy by emailing me. So thank you for listening, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, okay?